The James Show Podcast.
Well, the big story today is definitely the big, beautiful bill. It passes its next hurdle in the Senate. And while it's not a done deal, this was probably the more difficult of the two houses to get through. And we'll see how this shakes out in the reconciliation process. That's what they call it when the House has passed a version of a bill and the Senate has passed a version of the bill, but they're not the exact same. So they have to go to a conference committee, try and hack out a version where at least 50% of both houses will vote for whatever is a mixture of both bills. So it's probably going to happen. Now, it's not a 100%, but it's probably going to happen. Now, there's a lot of people, including Elon Musk, who find this enterprise completely disappointing because it doesn't do anything to balance the budget. Not only does it not balance the budget, it doesn't even reduce the deficit. Not only does it not even reduce the deficit, it raises the deficit. And so for those of us who call ourselves fiscal conservatives, this is not a good bill. If you still support this anyway, well, then you are abandoning your fiscal conservatism. And look, there's some other stuff in the bill that a lot of conservatives like, or people who tend to support Team Red. They say it locks down the border. Well, the border's already locked down. So don't let that be the excuse that people are using to sell you on this. Remember, we just proved that it didn't take any new legislation or laws or change in policies to shut down the border. It just took the will of the executive to actually enforce the laws that are already on the book. So I don't buy that. But the tax cuts are a good thing. I'm not going to lie with you there. That's probably the thing that affects you the most. Now, this is being sold by the people who voted against it on Team Blue as this is tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. Well, yeah, it's tax breaks for everyone else that pays taxes too. Everyone's taxes were going to go up. Of course, a disproportionate amount of the tax cuts will be beneficial to people who make over $1 million a year. My goodness, especially when you have 40% of the country, even though they work, still don't pay into the system. So, duh. But that's good. I like the no tax on tips. I like the no tax on overtime. That's pretty good. Extending the tax cuts from 2017, definitely good. But we didn't really touch social programs. They kind of nibbled at the edges with work requirements on Medicaid and SNAP. With food stamps, we call them SNAP now. I guess that sounds better. But for me, it's not enough. My preference, balance the budget. My compromise where I'm willing to meet you in the middle is we reduce the annual deficit. This doesn't even do that. Remember, the spending levels that we are surfing on right now is the Biden spending levels. There's the spending levels that jumped way up during COVID, and then they only backed off a little bit, and we're still running a $2 trillion a year deficit because we managed to retain a lot of that spending, even though we're no longer in an emergency 5 years later. So we can't even cut that. We can't even get back to the baseline that we had before the air quote emergency spending under COVID, even though we're 5 years after discovering all those fallacies. And then we have the Republicans come in and they're going to add over $200 billion to the deficit next year in the first year. It's going to be over $3 trillion in the final year that it's been scored. So no, I don't support the big, beautiful bill. I'm scared to say that because I know a lot of people are going to think ill of me for not agreeing with the president. But this is one place where I disagree. I want a balanced budget. I want a smaller government. And this drives me absolutely insane how all my friends and people who listen to this show and people who send me emails and comment on social media, how many of them will say they want a limited government but won't ever put their foot down on government growth? You have the Team Blue that drives me and you nuts all the time. It's a threat to democracy. Oh, he's a threat to democracy. We're just concerned about democracy. Democracy this, democracy that. Isn't it a big threat to democracy that the voters never get to go to the ballot box and vote for someone who wants a smaller government? Isn't the real threat to democracy that whoever you vote for, government's going to get bigger and more powerful, and they're going to spend more money, and they're going to accumulate more power into the hands of the elites? And there's no party, either party that goes against that. Isn't that a bigger threat to democracy than ICE agents wearing a mask or someone have to show a voter ID? So I'm sorry. I hope you don't hate me for this. I know you probably disagree, but I'm Rand Paul in this one. I think he's the only guy in the Senate that voted against it because it's not fiscally conservative enough. Of course, all the Democrats, they didn't like the spending cuts and they didn't like the tax cuts. But it's not really a spending cut. It's a spending increase. The Democrats just want even more. They don't think that's big enough. That's insane. That is absolutely bonkers. If you voted against this bill because it's too fiscally conservative, you're off the plantation. You're up in Mars. You're not even playing a real game. Are you on mushrooms? Raising the annual deficit by $270 billion next year. That's tightening the purse too much. Okay, so y'all are crazy people. Republicans are supposed to be the sane ones that at least want to tap the brakes on the growth of government. Ideally, you'd think they would want to turn this car around and shrink the size of government, but it doesn't. So it's probably going to go through. I lost again. I got it. I'm not going to get my way on this. We're not going to stop growing government. We're not going to pause it. We're definitely not going to reverse it. So let's deal with the facts as we have them. How is this going to affect your money? Because, this will affect your money. Spencer McGowan from Net Worth Radio. You can hear him Saturdays at 4 o'clock here on WBAP. Welcome to the James Show yet again. And look, let's take a dispassionate, non-political approach to this. How will the big, beautiful bill affect the person listening?
Well, the first is I think you've avoided a 2026 recession.
And I assume that you're talking about the tax rates from the 2017 Jobs Act would sunset, and everyone would have to bring home a little bit less money starting on January 1st of next year. Is that what this is based on?
Yes. Yeah. If you take a couple earning $200,000 a year, it's over $10,000 that the tax bill would have gone up next year. Well, if you take $800 or $900 a month for the average couple earning about $200,000, then you really have a huge cut after all the inflation, right? And all the healthcare costs going up and all the insurance costs going up. Now you put that on top and you actually have to have a 5% reduction in spending for that hypothetical couple. Well, you do that, you literally do have a recession that was programmed in. So that's the good news, despite our shared concerns on the fact that Congress really never cuts back spending.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up because that belies the point, some of the criticism when the tax cuts were passed back at the end of 2017, when people were saying this was just for millionaires and billionaires. No, it took the average family and raised their standard of living by about 5%. And so that's what we were just maintaining by keeping the tax cuts or the tax rates where they're at now. But we added some new tax cuts. We got rid of taxes on tips. Is there still no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security? How'd that work out?
Well, there's some limits on that. As you know, Congress likes to have things rather complex because then you can't see what they actually did.
Right.
And in this case, there's limits on how much, tax-free tips, for example, can be. Otherwise, we'd all get paid in tips, right?
That'd be nice. I'd switch real quick.
And so there's some disincentives for that. Yes, the taxes are reduced on Social Security, but of course, with Congress, income limits that totally phase that out happens to be about the amount of a congressional salary.
So what a coincidence!
What a coincidence to them. That's an important threshold. If you make more than them, you don't get the break. But it's gradually phased out. So yes, mission accomplished on that part of it. Now, what's not built in, of course, is the future growth in the economy. So the left side of the equation, Congressional Budget Office and the other office that does that, they say it adds $3 to $4 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. Well, that's if they didn't raise if they didn't extend the tax cuts. Yeah, that could be true. However, that was money they weren't getting, right?
Right.
So they think of it as a deficit increase. Now you get to the real issue, which is spending not actually going down. Now, they reduced the current plan for increased spending by $1.7 trillion, but that's not a reduction in spending.
Oh, I get it. All right, we're talking with Spencer McGowan from Net Worth Radio. You can hear him Saturdays at 4 or McGowan Wealth Group. I think the big news out of this, it's not being heralded by Fox News, Fox Business, MSNBC, or CNN, because it doesn't fit any of their narratives. And I think the number one impact for the person listening to us right now, Spencer, is going to be inflation. If we're still going to have $2 trillion deficits every year, that means they're going to have to print that or somehow monetize that debt, add to the currency pool. And that, you know, how over the last 5 years we've gotten a 25% pay cut. I think we can expect that over the next 5 years because of these deficits.
Well, there's two mitigating factors there. And the deregulation plan for the second half of 2025, has 10 regulations, existing rules repealed for every one issued. That's huge. And it's starting to have an impact. Then you have the investments in new manufacturing facilities here in the United States, and the estimates are in the trillions for that investment. So you do have a larger economy. Deregulation counters inflation. And at the same time, if you get the type of growth rates, when Reagan deregulated, you had 6% GDP growth for the only year it's happened in modern history, and it's not that modern. It was 1984, and that was right after the deregulation. So there's two mitigating factors. The other is the rescission process. The president has already sent to rescind PBS funding and the USAID program. That's already on the desk of Congress. What they do with the rescissions is a huge key to this, because that's the next step in reducing the actual spending.
Wait, so Spencer, are you telling me that they have to send a rescission package because the funding for NPR and PBS is still in the budget, and a lot of these other DOGE cuts are still in the budget?
Well, the DOGE cuts total, according to U.S. Debt Clock, over $500 billion so far. Implemented, right, doesn't look like, well, the implemented is substantially smaller and maybe only 2% of that.
All right, I find that quite disappointing. As a money manager, should the people listening be make any moves here?
Well, in this case, I do think that the 2018 tariff and the tariff deregulation example is relevant, where inflation actually came down in 2018 for those that have studied it, and GDP went up in part due to deregulation, which is now accelerated. So I think you're in a much different picture. If anything, the deficit spending is more sustainable without inflation. So it's not like you're not at a flash point, an inflection point where it's going to take everything down. It actually got a little bit better. However, you want to see some rescission bills going in on that spending bill, the one that's just passed, the one big beautiful bill. Rescission orders are going to be hopefully the next good news that we see.
I would love to hear more of that. What's coming up on Net Worth Radio this weekend, Spencer?
Well, we did our third quarter update. Surprise, tariffs did not lead to more inflation. It's near a 4-year low.
Right.
The economy was not disrupted by all the Chinese rubber duckies that didn't make it to Walmart. In fact, GDP running about 2.9%.
Love it. Well, you're going to have something to talk about because we have the big jobs number coming out. Isn't it this Friday where we'll get the jobs number for June, and that'll sort of wrap up the second quarter, and we'll have a lot to talk about. I'll be listening in.
Well, the market rally was a huge surprise. I heard you reference it the other day that, wow, it was supposed to be really bad, and there was a 20% bear market, and then the S&P went up 29%. What was that? That was lower inflation and decent growth. Everything's pretty much okay.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the James Show yet again. This is Spencer McGowan from Net Worth Radio, or the McGowan Wealth Group. You can listen to his show Saturdays, 4 p.m. here on WBAP. For those of you who just want government to be smaller, for the love of God, in our entire lives, can we get government to be smaller? Disappointed yet again. Lucy with the football. And the painful part of this is it's not that you necessarily even voted wrong. It's that both parties agree. We just need to keep growing government. So Elon Musk did a post right after the James Show was over yesterday on his platform X, where he says, if this insane spending bill passes, the America Party will be formed the next day. Our country needs an alternative to the Democrat-Republican uniparty so that people actually have a voice. So that started a fun little discussion over whether or not we should have a new political party. There's Kalshi. They do betting odds. And just since they put up their poll last night, the odds of Elon Musk creating a new political party in 2025 is up to 41%. So Elon has also continued talking about the politicians who said they wanted limited government. They said they wanted conservative principles. They said they wanted to get our fiscal house in order. They went up to D.C. and they voted for this bill. Elon's talking to them in this next tweet. He says, anyone who campaigned on the promise of reducing spending but continues to vote for the biggest debt ceiling increase in history will see their face on this poster in the primary next year. And it's a liar, liar, pants on fire poster. So he's going to what? Primary out everyone in the Senate but Rand Paul? I think so. That's what he just said. He has the money to do it. This should get interesting because I've whined about this on the radio it'll be 23 years next month. And it doesn't really matter, does it? Me having an opinion and barking it in this microphone and trying to do it in an entertaining manner without running you off, even if you disagree with me, hasn't done anything to reduce the debt or the deficit or get anyone's fiscal house in order. But it means something different when Elon Musk says it. James Parker says it, whoop-de-doo. Elon Musk says it, you better pay attention. Because he's finally noticing something that a lot of you have noticed, and I hear this from listeners all the time, is the fact that there's just one uniparty in reality. They pretend to be two parties. On the very important issues, whether or not we get into forever wars or constantly bombing other countries or spend way too much, more than we take in, or we have to print money and cause inflation, they all agree on those, the super most important things that they do. They agree on that. What do they disagree on? Just regular old moral panic stuff. Abortion, men and women's sports, things that don't crumble empires. This crumbles empires. You understand why I'm concerned about this? It's not because I'm a butthead or I want poor people to starve or I want the people who are less fortunate to have their health care ripped from them. No, I care about this is because this is how empires collapse. On the micro level, we all understand. You know, how does this tax code affect me? How does trimming this entitlement affect other people? But in the macro level, this is how societies are driven into the ground. It's by terrible economics, usually. Not all the time, but more often than not. Because think of what's happened in your lifetime. When you were growing up, we had a co-equal superpower to the United States. It was called the Soviet Union. Did the Soviet Union collapse because they didn't have a Golden Dome missile defense and they had a bunch of missiles rain down on them? Did an invading army knock them over militarily? No, they had a fiscal collapse. They couldn't pay their bills anymore, and so they couldn't get the services anymore. You inflate your currency to a place where it's unsustainable. It's the same thing that you saw happen to Venezuela. How did Venezuela collapse? Did they not have a golden dome and there was missiles that were rained down upon them? Were they invaded by a foreign army? Or did they embrace this ridiculous entitlement spending downward spiral where they promise everyone a free lunch, they print money to get it, and then you just go down the spiral until you're eating your zoo animals? Roman Empire, Ottoman Empire, Spanish Empire, all economic collapses. And for you people who seem to be so concerned about national security, well, we've got to keep giving all kinds of weapons to Ukraine and bombing the snot out of Russia. We got to bomb the snot out of Iran. We got to bomb the snot out of Gaza. We got to bomb the snot out of Houthi rebels in Yemen and Syria and all over the place. No, this is the real economic collapse. This is what's threatening our national security far more than some Houthi rebel in Yemen. So no, that's why I'm against this. I cannot support this. It doesn't even give a head fake toward balancing the budget or trimming the size of government at all. Getting lost in the shuffle, today's big, beautiful bill news is the fact that there's a looming trade deadline for tomorrow. Michelle Schultz is coming back on from Schultz Trade Law. And who all's on the facing the firing squad here as far as the tariff threats, Michelle?
Well, I'd say it's the vast majority. And thanks for having me, by the way. It's the vast majority of countries are going to be, they're going to be confused for a little bit right now. We're looking at July 9th for the tariffs to snap back to the April 2nd announcement rates, which could be as high as 50% on some items. And some of the tariffs, like the steel and aluminum, have stayed in place. So, gosh, we've got the Court of International Trade opinion, but that has been paused, and it seems the administration's been pretty successful in buying time with that decision. But sooner or later, probably mid-August, we'll find out more about what the higher court's going to say.
And you're right. I said that wrong. It's not tomorrow. It's a week from tomorrow before the smaller trade deals are supposed to be finalized with other countries. So are we looking at mostly European countries here, or is India rolled into this one?
You know, that's such a good question, because I've heard a lot of talk about India, and it seems like a positive relationship. But so far, nothing concrete. The only deal that we actually have that we know for sure 100% is with the UK. And I still have hopes for India. It's interesting. I was actually just working with an Indian client today on imports, and we're looking at their tariff codes to figure out what's going to happen and what will change, because anything coming from India will be subject to a higher tariff unless we reach an agreement.
So we're talking with Michelle Schultz from Schultz Trade Law. How are we doing with Canada? They were doing some sort of digital service tax, so we backed off the trade talks. Trade talks are back on. Are we getting along with these guys or not?
I think we're having whiplash, or we don't know if we're friends with them or not. They had imposed a tax on digital services, and that was kind of in retaliation for all the issues that we've caused lately. But then, as soon as Canada backed off, we backed off too. So as long as no one escalates it, we're back in a good place with Canada for now. I wouldn't count on it, though, forever.
So how are things going with China? We announced that we had a trade deal done. I still haven't seen it. Has anyone seen it?
No. I have not seen it. I've heard that it exists, and I know that it's at least a tentative trade deal, but we don't have a final agreement or final deal. One thing that I expect is I noticed that President Trump is looking at doing more letters, sending letters to people or to countries. And I'm thinking so it would be more of like an informal agreement than your typical trade agreement, which would be.
Well, what does he mean by that? Michelle Schultz, you seem to know a level of depth there. When he says, I'm going to send them a letter, that sounds like something that has some sort of legal significance. To the rest of us, it sounds like he's just typing off an email. So what's the letter mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the normal process would be that you would have lengthy negotiations of specific provisions of the harmonized tariff code. And so you'd look at specific items for each country and decide what you're going to do with them. But he's looking at with such a broad brush that when he says he'd rather just write letters, I think what he's saying is he's just going to pick a number and apply it to everything from that country.
How do you think it's going so far? It seems like he's been able to work out a few trade deals by using tariffs as a pain point. Are we going to get similar results out of these other people who are resisting?
I think we will. I think they'll back down eventually. The problem that I see is that some tariffs will be removed. Some tariffs will probably be reduced, but others seem to be here to stay. So we're still in a really volatile situation where we don't know which tariffs will be lower, and we don't know when. Also, there are some, like the steel and aluminum tariffs, that are here and they are not going away. In fact, they've added more tariff numbers in this past few weeks.
We're talking with Michelle Schultz from Schultz Trade Law. You guys actually have a tariff tracker on your website, Schultz Trade Law. which has the reciprocal tariff percent, the effective date when it's going to be slapped on. And there's a lot of July 9ths on your tariff tracker.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. You'll have all the countries and what the tariff situation is for them. That's going to be some. I'm going to bookmark this and check in on it in about a week and a half. It might look drastically different, but good stuff. We appreciate you being on the James Show. This is Michelle Schultz, SchultzTradeLaw.com. Thank you.
The James Show Podcast.